Hi guys, welcome to my channel. This is Amar and I hope you guys are having a great day. And today we're going to be reviewing my 2010 Dodge Viper. But before we get to my Dodge Viper, I want to kind of give you guys a backstory about my Vipers and my history with Vipers. So it was 2009, 2010. At that time I had a '07 GT500 and one of my best friends at that time wanted to get a supercar as well. So he decided to get a 2008 Dodge Viper. At first, he was going for that, I think it was an orange copper color, but then he later settled on snakeskin green. So one came on sale. It was in Vancouver. By the time we even left our houses, left our homes, it was already sold. Weeks had passed by, nothing came on sale. And then I think it was eventually around about 2 or 3 months later, one came on sale in Medicine Hat. So I live in the Vancouver area, and Medicine Hat is in the province of Alberta, which is about 13 hours from our place. So instead of driving, we took a plane, landed in Calgary, we rented a car, and then we went down to Medicine Hat and met the gentleman who owned the Viper. He was a very, very nice guy, older gentleman. He met us in a parking lot, drove us to the car, which was located in a warehouse that he owned. We got to the place, he opened up the garage, and it was just amazing. The color was better than I thought. I've never seen that color duplicated again on another vehicle, not on a Lamborghini or any other model. So checked the car out. He wouldn't let us test drive it. He said, just pay me and you can take the car. So we gave him the bank draft. We took off with the car. Initially, my friend started to drive the car in town, but eventually he gave it to me. He said, Amar, you've had a fast car for a while. And at that time, you're buying a Dodge Viper. I was 23 years old. He was 21 years old. And we were scared of the car, to be honest. And no traction control, over 600, not over, but exactly 600 horsepower. So he gave me the keys and I drove, and it was fine. At first I drove slow through the Rocky Mountains, and eventually the weather turned to the worst. I couldn't see 2 feet in front of me. I think I did like 70 or 80 the whole way home through the Coquihalla Highway, which is a very dangerous highway where I live. So I went really slowly. I couldn't see 2 feet in front of me. It was hailing. It was raining like crazy. But we drove 13 hours straight, and we eventually made it home. So we had a lot of fun with that car, and I had my '07 GT500. We cruised back and forth, young kids with nice cars. It was a pretty amazing time, to be honest. Eventually, my friend said, you know what, this car is too quiet, and I wanted to get an exhaust. And Vipers naturally are very quiet. That's just the way they come from the factory. So he decided to get a Bellinger exhaust. I think it's a $6,000 or $7,000 Bellinger exhaust. He took it to his local mechanic, and who was a pretty good mechanic. He had him install it. Weeks had passed by and the car started going to limp mode. We weren't sure why. We weren't that familiar with those kind of cars back then. I started going to limp mode. So basically what would happen is you couldn't go past like 60 or 70 kilometers. So we registered for a cruise, which was called the Diamond Rally here in Vancouver. And we got there, and what happened was on the highway, went back into limp mode. And there's a couple hundred cars here, and we're going 70 to 80 kilometers an hour in the right lane, sorry. It was pretty embarrassing, and that was kind of the breaking point for my friend. So we took the car back to his mechanic. He's like, fix this car. He didn't fix it. So what happened was, my friend calls me a few days later. He says, Amar, the mechanic just crashed my car. I was like, what do you mean your mechanic crashed your car? Thought he was joking at first. He's like, I'll come pick you up. So he come picks me up from work. We drive down to the mechanic shop, and there it is, sitting sideways in a ditch in a field. It was me, the tow truck driver, the mechanic, and my friend, and we all had our arms crossed, staring at the car. It was kind of weird seeing a car like one of your friends. You see it on YouTube all the time, but it was very weird to kind of see it in person. So the car got towed, and it was written off. My friend got paid out, which was honestly, was the best case scenario for him because he went on to buy an SLS, which he bought for a very low price, and that was the right time to buy the SLS, and it ended up going over the $200,000 range. Anyways, back to the Viper. So a few years passed, and another Viper had come on sale. It was a 2013 GTS, and I just like to say that car was 10 times better than the Gen 4 Viper. The interior is better and nicer to drive. It had traction control. It was better in every single way, and it was better by a long shot in every single way. So I drove that car for the whole summer. I had actually bought it for $80,000. I believe it had like 10K on it. I drove it 5K during the summer, and someone had offered me 80,000, exactly what I paid for it about a few months later, and I just ended up selling it. So I made all my money back, So that kind of brings me on to my current Dodge Viper. This Viper was located in Moncton, New Brunswick, which is about, I don't know, 6,000 kilometers from here. So obviously there's no way I was going to drive there. I negotiated for a couple of months. I always lowball people when I look at cars. You know, cars aren't like properties; they're everywhere, right? I wanted 65. I offered him 40, and we ended up settling for around 50 to 52,000. So I flew over there, took a plane from Vancouver and flew all the way to Halifax. And a friend of mine, she drove me to Moncton. I met the guy who's actually another YouTuber. Very nice guy. I think Tyler Nisbet. He has the Viper underscore that guy or something like that. Super nice guy. The car wasn't at his house actually. So when I got to Moncton, which is another 3 hours from Halifax, he took me to the shop where he was holding the car. It looked great. You know, honestly, it was -1 or -2. It was snowing. I couldn't really take it for a proper test drive, and I don't even know what to look for in a Viper. You know, they're already rough and rugged as it is. You just kind of buy a Viper. So I went and bought the Viper, and I drove it to a trucking company. They took it from there to Toronto, and from Toronto got on a train, and then it came all the way to Vancouver. It took a month to get here, and then they had to pass a whole bunch of inspections, which took a couple of weeks because of COVID. So needless to say, here is a Dodge Viper now. It's here, and this wasn't a stock Dodge Viper. They had the Bellinger exhaust. It had no. I think it was straight piped, and it had intake. I think that's it. And it was tuned by a guy named Todd Abraham. So this gentleman had the same setup as my friend, but he had brought in a specialist called Todd Abraham from Southern California, who went to New Brunswick, and he not modified, but he tuned the car so it run properly. And this car is an absolute monster. Alright guys, there it is. The 2010 Dodge Viper. You guys are familiar with 8.4 liter, 560 pound-feet of torque, 600 horsepower. But like I mentioned in my sit-down story, this one does have the Bellinger exhaust, a straight pipe, and it has the headers. And it's pretty much undrivable. I drove it a couple of days ago and my ears are still ringing because of the Corsa, because of the side exhaust this car has. Alright guys, so what's so great about the Dodge Viper? Let's start with the looks. The hood is the most dominating feature on this car. It's almost half the length of the entire car, but it has to be because there's a monster living underneath that hood. The V10, 8.4 liter, 600 horsepower, 560 pound-feet of torque monster. The other dominating features of this car are the massive 345 rear tires. You know, back in the day, cars didn't really have 345s; they had much smaller tires. So this car was one of a kind, and it needed those massive tires because this car does not have traction control. So if you're driving this car in the rain or if it's cold, you have to be very careful. If you look at most Dodge Vipers, they've already been in accidents because they're very hard to drive during the cold weather, or if you try to kind of do too much and you're not experienced, because this car will bite and it will bite hard. Another crazy feature about this car is the side exhaust. You know, they look cool, they sound cool, but when you're driving, all the heat from the exhaust comes up through the seats and into your lower body, and your upper body is a different temperature and your lower body is a different temperature. And also, the noise enters out of the side of the car exactly where your left ear is. My ears have been ringing for the last 3 days, and I drove the car 2 days ago. That didn't make any sense. I drove the car 3 days ago, and my ears have been ringing for the last 3 days. It's just a very unusual car. The dominating feature of this car is the engine. Back in the 80s, late 80s and early 90s, this car was introduced with the 8-liter V10 that had around 400 horsepower. Now it's all the way to 645. The Gen 4 that I have only makes about 600 stock. Obviously, this car's not stock. This one made 595 to the wheels. But back to the engine. The power is very linear. You're not gonna, lose control at low RPM. The power does come high end, so you can drive the car to 4,000 to 5,000 RPM and not be in too much trouble. It's in the upper gears when you're going at high speeds. If the tires aren't warm, the weather's not good, and you don't have heat in the tires, you can be in a lot of trouble really fast with this car. So the engine is a dominating feature of this car, but it does sound amazing. It's raw. It doesn't sound like an Audi R8 V10. It doesn't sound like a V10 Lamborghini engine, which are practically the same engine. It has its own rugged tractor feel. It does sound like a tractor at low RPMs, but I like it. It's slow revving, but it makes a lot of power, a lot of torque. That's pretty much it for the engine. The interior of this car is the worst interior I've ever seen of any car. All plastic, all rubber. The seats are the only nice feature in this car. The seats hold you in place during tight corners. You feel very, very well held in, especially compared to my Corvette ZR1. Other than that, the stereo is probably the worst stereo I've ever heard. It has two subwoofers behind the driver, and I don't know what they do. They do absolutely nothing. I have navigation in my generation Viper, but it's smaller than my cell phone. No joke, it's literally smaller than my cell phone. I wouldn't even use it if I had to use it. Other than that, getting out of the car is tough because the side exhausts run along your leg here. So when you want to get out, you gotta pick your leg up and go over. Which, if you're wearing shorts, the exhaust gets so hot you can literally burn your left calf. They come with the smallest wipers I've ever seen. The windshield is tiny. If you're anywhere over 5'10", you have to kind of look underneath the windshield like that. So the interior is just a horrible place to be honest. I did notice once you're in there for a while, you do get used to it, you do get comfortable, and you're okay with it. The problem with my car is it just got the exhaust. It's way too loud, and honestly, I'll probably gonna sell this car as soon as I get a chance to sell it. The driving experience. People assume you buy a Dodge Viper for the looks, or you buy the Dodge Viper because it's an iconic car, America's first supercar. But it's honestly a very, very good driver's car. It does have a lot of feedback through the steering wheel. At low speeds, the steering is really heavy, but at high speed, it gets actually pretty light. So that's a bit odd, but overall, it's a good steering feel. The throttle response is amazing. It is naturally aspirated, like we talked about before. So it is very linear power. You can go through the gears. There's no crazy torque that just comes in till the end. It's honestly a very, very good car. So what I meant to say by that is, if you're driving from startup to 4,000, 4,500 RPM, it's drivable. You're not going to lose control at those RPM. Where you get in trouble is when you go from 4,000 to 4,500 to 6,000. That's when all the power comes in, and you better be holding the steering wheel with both your hands because it can get pretty hairy pretty quick. So that's like the main driving characteristic of this car. The brake feel is pretty amazing. It does stop really good. It does have 14, I believe it has 14.5 or 14.7 in the front and 14.5 in the back. So they're steel rotors, they're not carbon ceramic, but they do a good job. Vipers always have good brakes, especially after the 08 or 2010 models. The earlier ones didn't have ABS, so the wheels would lock up, but I've had no issues with this car. So that's it about the driving experience. I would also say it's very fun to drive because you can actually go through the gears and have a lot of fun. The gear ratio is tall. You're doing 80 or 90 in the first gear, but that's okay. That allows you to go into second gear and third gear, where my ZR1, you're doing 157 in second gear. And in a lot of roads, I just hold second in that car. Where in the Viper, I'm allowed to kind of go through the gears, have fun, shift down, shift up. Hey guys, thank you for watching my video. If you guys like what you guys saw, please like. And if you want to watch more videos like this, please subscribe. Thanks again. Bye guys.